today we have a very special course covering the basics of Ableton Live 12. So if you've never used Ableton Live 12 before, this is a fantastic place to begin. This is our beginner level 1 course. And we'll be going over some of the basics of the program. We'll talk about the arrangement view versus the session view. We'll take a look at some of the different windows around the interface. And we'll also be building a track from the ground up using samples, synth sounds, and drums all provided for this course. So follow along with me as we build our very first track in Ableton Live 12. So let's take a quick look at Ableton's interface here. We'll overview the interface and just kind of make sense of what we're looking at. Quick disclaimer though, I'm not necessarily going to talk about every single button that we're seeing everywhere on screen right now. We will discuss things as they become relevant in these different videos, but I will go over some of the main ones that you'll be using a lot up here on the top, and then some of these buttons along the edges and things like that. So I'm working off of the default Ableton project. This is just, when you open Ableton Live for the first time, this is what you're looking at. And we're looking at the session view right now. That's what this is called, these kind of vertical columns that represent our different tracks here. I got 2 MIDI and 2 audio tracks. I got a couple of return tracks over here. I got my main output track over here. I can toggle between this view and what's called the arrangement view by clicking these 2 buttons up here. The 3 vertical lines are showing me the session view. The 3 horizontal lines are called the arrangement view. This is what you're probably used to seeing if you're coming from another DAW like Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase or Bitwig or something like that. You've probably seen a view like this before if you've used another digital audio workstation. So this is the more traditional arrangement view. I'm going to start here for this video, and we will get into the session view more. But we can also toggle between those 2 views by pressing the Tab key, which is a really important hotkey to remember because you'll be kind of going back and forth between these 2 views, depending on how you're using the software. Let's go along some of the important controls up here along the top. I'm going to skip ahead to this one here, which is our master project tempo. So when I hit the play button up here, this is my transport bar, my transport controls, which are my play, start, and record, play, stop, and record buttons. These are going to be pretty universal across other digital audio workstations, but if I hit play up here, this tempo is telling me what my project tempo is playing at. So this playhead is moving through the timeline at 120 BPM. If I move a little bit further to the right here, I have my metronome, and if I turn that on, we can hear that ticking along at exactly 120 BPM. I can use this number box here. I can click and drag up to increase my tempo or drag it down to decrease. I can also type values in here. So if I'm doing maybe like a house track, maybe I'll do like 120 BPM or 130 BPM. If I'm doing a drum and bass track, I don't know, maybe I'll go up to like 170 BPM. If I'm doing like a hip hop track, maybe we go down to, I don't know, 90 BPM or something like that, right? So we can change our master project tempo from there. We can use this metronome to hear this sort of time guidance playing along at exactly that tempo here. So the metronome, while we're at it, we can change the sound of the metronome. If you click this little drop down arrow just to the right of it, you can see here it says sound, classic, click, and wood. We just have those 3 different ones we can choose from. I'll just play them really quickly. Here's the old school. If you've been using Ableton Live in previous versions, you may have heard this before. We got just a classic click sound. If you've used Apple's Logic, for example, you're going to be used to something like this, or I think Pro Tools has a similar sound. And then my personal favorite, the wood block, because it's spicy. It just adds a little, adds a little extra spice to your life. So that's our metronome there. Moving over here, we have this scale mode thing. It can be used to set a scale for your song. And that's not necessarily going to take everything that you've written and lock it to a specific scale. But as we create MIDI clips and things, you'll see that we can use this function to kind of highlight a specific scale on a MIDI clip. We can change between different root keys here and then a lot of different musical scales from this drop-down menu here. This button will turn that function on or off. I'll just leave it on because that's the default setting for now. I mentioned the transport controls over here, our play, start. I keep saying start, our play, stop, and record buttons up here. These numbers, if I hit play again, these numbers here represent our position in the timeline on the arrangement. So the first number represents which bar we're in. So I'm coming up on bar 4 right now. The second number is showing us the quarter note beat subdivisions. Maybe I'll turn the metronome on so we can kind of hear that and see it at the same time. So you see this number ticks along exactly with the metronome, our quarter note subdivisions, and then these fast moving numbers here are representing the 16th note subdivisions of each quarter note. So if I hit stop right now, says 11.3.3. If I zoom into our playhead marker here, we can see that I'm stopped in the middle of bar 11. If I zoom in a little bit further, we see these decimal places on top are indicating those same numbers up here. I'm on the third quarter note subdivision. And if I zoom in even further, I'm on the third 16th note subdivision of that quarter note. So 11.3.3, and there it is up there in the arrangement counter. If we move to the right here, we got a few additional controls. This has to do with recording MIDI in the arrangement view. This has to do with automation. These have to do with recording in different ways. We'll talk about those as they become relevant. So kind of keep those in your back pocket for now. We will revisit those. Up over here, these are pretty important controls. These are our loop brace controls. So you'll see in the arrangement, we have this bracket here that's kind of floating along the top. We can click on the middle of it and move it around. This is called the loop brace. We can adjust the left and right edges of it by clicking the left and right arrows on the left and right corners of it. We can turn the loop brace on or off by clicking this loop button right in the middle. You see it's highlighted in yellow now. That means it's on. So let me make it a little bit shorter here. But if I play my arrangement and it gets to that point in the loop brace, it's just going to keep continuing to loop within those confines until I turn the loop brace off. Or if I skip the playhead over here somewhere and continue playback over here, well, now it's going to ignore the loop brace. But the loop brace is on if this yellow circle arrow going around in a circle button is turned on. We can turn it off by clicking it again. We can also use the hotkey Command L to turn on the loop brace. Let me click on my loop brace, press Command L. We can see it turned on there. I can press Command L again to turn it off. If you're on a PC, it's going to be Control L to turn the loop brace on or off. To the left and right of this, we see the start position of the loop brace. So this is telling me that my loop brace is currently sitting at the beginning of bar 9 here, bar 9, beat number 1, 16th note number 1. This number box over here represents the length of the loop. So right now my loop is exactly 2 bars long. It's 2 bars, 0 quarter notes, 0 16th notes. If I adjust the length of it, we'll see this number change up here. Now it's 4 bars long. If I make it a little bit smaller, now we're 3 bars long, or maybe we're 2 bars and 2 beats long, right? So this is telling us the start position of the loop. This is telling us how long the loop brace currently is. We can also adjust it by clicking across the arrangement and selecting time, and then pressing Command L. It will jump the loop brace right to my time selection, and it will set the start and end points there, and it'll turn the loop brace on if it wasn't on already. Over here to the right, we have this draw or pencil tool button here. We can turn that on or off by clicking it. We can also use the B key to turn that on and off, B as in boy, or I always like to think B as in pencil. But B will turn the pencil or the draw tool on or off. We'll use that more when we're dealing with drawing in MIDI notes and maybe when we get into some automation. Over here, this computer MIDI keyboard button, if that's on, that means that certain keys on your computer keyboard can be used to trigger MIDI notes. I'll turn it off for now. We'll talk more about that later. We also have a key map mode. This is kind of interesting. When I turn that on, you see a bunch of the buttons and knobs and things in my arrangement have turned orange, and that means that I can map those to keys on my keyboard, on my computer keyboard. That's useful if you want to maybe create some custom hotkeys for certain things. And then we have this MIDI map. This is going to function in much the same way as the key map, but this is for MIDI controllers. So when I turn that on, a bunch of things have highlighted in this kind of bluish color, and that means that anything highlighted in blue, I can click on that and I can map it to a button, a knob, a fader, or even a key on my MIDI controller if I'm using a MIDI keyboard, for example. So I'll turn that off for now. We have CPU usage over here. This is good to keep an eye on if you're running a lot of plugins in a really busy session. We mentioned the session and arrangement view toggles. If we jump down here to the lower right-hand corner, this is going to show and hide the mixer. If we're looking at the arrangement view, if we look at the session view, we can show and hide the mixer from here as well. This arrow drop-down menu next to the mixer toggle seems a little discreet here, but it's actually pretty important. This will show and hide, let me go back to my arrangement view. This will show and hide different functions here along the right side of my arrangement. Let me turn off the mixer for a second. But if I click here, we can show and hide our inputs and outputs. We can show and hide our sends, and we can show and hide the volume faders, which are basically the mixer controls there. As we get more into these, as I said, as things become relevant, I'll explain that more, but we can use this disclosure arrow down here, this context menu arrow, to show and hide different track features there. Let me hide my mixer for now. Down here on the bottom, we have this lower window. This is called the detail view. This can be toggled between what's called the clip view and the device view. We can use these two buttons down here to toggle between those two views. We can open or close this window by clicking whichever view is highlighted. You see there's a little yellow arrow here. If I click that, I can close that lower window. I can also press both of them to open both of them up. I have the clip view up here, the device view down here. Clip view is going to show clips when we click on them in the arrangement. This is currently an empty arrangement, so I see nothing yet. Device view is going to show me any instruments or audio effects or MIDI effects that I have lined up on the track, or plugins, things like that. It's kind of like my channel strip. I'll see that there. I can open and close both of them. I can also use the hotkey Option, Command, or Alt, Control L to open and hide that detail view window. And once it's open, I can use the hotkey Shift Tab to toggle between the two. You see it's kind of bouncing back and forth between the two different views there. So those hotkeys I find very important. I'm using those all the time. So Option, Command, or Alt, Control L, and then Shift Tab to toggle between the two. Over here on the lower left-hand corner, this little I button, this is our info view. This is super important, especially if you're brand new to Ableton Live, because with this on, we can hover our mouse over anything in the arrangement and it'll give us a little tooltip about what that is. If it's a button, what it does. Sometimes it'll even tell you if there's a hotkey to show and hide a specific window or something like that. So the info view, really, really handy to learn about different facets of the interface here. I've been using Ableton Live for almost 20 years now, and I still will open this from time to time if I'm using a new audio effect or maybe an instrument or a synth or something I haven't used in a long time and I can't remember what certain controls do. The info view is really, really handy for that. So we can open it up by closing this or clicking this I button here to open and close it, or we can press Shift ? To open and close that info view as well. In the top left corner, we have this button up here. This is going to open and close the browser, and it's worth spending a couple minutes here and just talking quickly about the browser. So the button to the right of the browser, this little drop-down context menu, we can show and hide a couple of additional windows at the bottom of the browser. We have our tuning systems here. If you're maybe writing music for foreign music, maybe if you're scoring a film or something, or if you're producing music in a different country and your culture uses a different tuning scale, there's a bunch of tunings that we can use here. You can go to tunings in the browser, drop them in, and then it'll tune the entire set to play in a different tuning system that's different from the standard Western tempered equal tempered 12-tone scale that we use. But pretty interesting, deep stuff. Probably won't be using that in the beginner level courses here, but it's there if you want it. I'm going to hide it for now. And then the groove pool, which you can use to add a little bit of swing or groove to your clips. We'll probably be getting into that in our level 2 beginner course, so I'm going to hide that for now. But jumping here to the browser, if we look at the browser, we have 3 different panes here. So on the left pane, we have collections, library, and places, these 3 different sort of sections here. In the right pane, we have kind of 2 subdivisions here. Up in the top, we have our content filters, and then the bottom right pane, which I usually like to click here and drag it up and make it a little bit bigger. This is where you can see the actual content, the actual stuff in the different sections that you're clicking on over here on the left-hand pane. So let's start with this library section here and these different categories of the library. So the first few here, all sounds, drums, instruments, audio effects, MIDI effects, and modulators. These are all things that are going to come with Ableton Live's core library. So depending on which version of Live you're using, if you're using Ableton Live Suite, you'll see it all. If you're using Ableton Live Standard, you'll see a little bit less. If you're using Ableton Live Intro, you'll see even a little bit less. But anything you see in these first 6 categories here is going to be stuff that comes with your core library. So as I'm clicking through and I click instruments, for example, and I look at the list here, and I got a whole lot of stuff, and maybe you have Ableton Live Standard and you're like, wait a minute, I don't see all that stuff. That's okay. Unless you have Suite, you're not going to see everything there. But you will see a handful of different instruments that do come with the standard or the intro versions. So the devices that come with Ableton Live, they're divided into 3 categories, which are instruments, audio effects, and MIDI effects. And if we go to all that, like I said, this is going to show us everything. Sounds is, we're starting to narrow things down a little bit. These are just going to be certain instrument sounds. So if I'm starting to write a track and I'm going to use the content filters up here, let's say I want to have a guitar sound and I want that a guitar sound to be acoustic. And now it's shown me all presets that are playing from Ableton Live built-in instruments that are different types of guitar sounds that meet the content filter categories that I've sort of clicked in here. So guitar unplugged and acoustic. If I want it to be analog or synthesized or something like that, now it narrows it down a little bit more, right? So we can use the content filters to kind of narrow things down. We can deselect things to kind of open the list back up. And now we see every single sound preset that comes with Ableton Live. Drums is going to be obviously a little bit more specific, just showing us drums. The first option here is a drum rack, which is kind of a blank tool for loading drum samples in and playing them back in MIDI. We'll go over it in a future video. And then all the rest of these are going to be presets for the drum rack or pre-collected drum kits that we can use to start building a beat in MIDI. Instruments, as I said, these are the instruments that come with Live's core library. Audio effects are the audio effects that come with the core library. MIDI effects are the MIDI effects that come with the core library. Modulators are a special type of effect that we can use to modulate or change things over time. These, I believe, are only going to be included in the Suite version of Live 12, but if you have the standard version, check and see. I don't think the modulators come with that because these are all Max for Live devices. However, if you own Ableton Live Standard and you also purchased a license for Max for Live, you can install these modulators, and you may see some of them here pre-installed already. Max for Live, as I said, these are going to be things that come with Ableton Live Suite, but you can install Max for Live devices. These are basically additional devices made by third-party developers. You can install these if you have, as I said, Ableton Live Standard, but you also own a license for Max for Live. You can use this section of your browser here. But Max for Live devices are also divided into instruments, audio effects, and MIDI effects. The difference here is that these are made by different developers. Some of them may be made by Ableton, but they're made by different developers and that they run in the Ableton Live interface. So they're kind of like plugins that are designed specifically for Ableton Live. We also have plugins down here. Now, these are going to be third-party plugins that are made by different developers aside from Ableton. So these might be things like Sonic Academy's Anna 2 or Kick 2, for example, or X for Records Serum or Arturia plugins, things like that, right? These are going to be devices that are instruments, audio effects, or MIDI effects made by different developers, but they're kind of a little bit more universal. You can use them in different software. If you own Bitwig, if you own Logic, et cetera, you'll be able to use these in those different DAWs as well. Max for Live devices are plugins that are only going to run in Ableton Live, so that's kind of the difference there. Clips are going to be little song starter ideas. If you click on them, you can get a little preview. Some of these will be MIDI, some of these will be audio. It doesn't really specify for you from the sample or from the clip name here, but you can use the content filters to kind of narrow it down and pick, do I want a drum clip? Do I want a music clip? So this is going to give me different drum beats. As I said, some will be MIDI, some will be audio. If you're not sure what it is, you can always click on it and drag it here in the arrangement where it says drop files and devices here, and it'll create the appropriate track. So it looks like this is a MIDI clip, and it loaded in this drum kit for me, and this is what I got, this little drum beat here. Let's maybe speed my project tempo up a little bit. Let's go back to 120. Hear that one more time. So yeah, as I said, clips could be nice little song starter ideas or little looped things. Some will be MIDI, some will be audio. It's kind of a luck of the draw situation there. I'm going to delete this new track I added by clicking on it over here and pressing delete. We also have samples. This is just going to be literally all audio samples, all recorded audio. So one-shot drum samples, music loops, drum loops, things like that. So that's where you can find those. Grooves are going to be presets for the groove pool. We'll look at those a little bit later on. Tunings I mentioned already. Templates, these are templates for different uses. If you're using Ableton Live to record or to do a podcast or something like that. There are a few built-in ones here. I have a bunch that I've created and saved for myself, but you'll see template projects there. And then places, let's talk quickly about this. If I go to packs, all of you will see the core library. If you've just installed Ableton Live for the first time or not, you will see the core library. And the core library is basically just showing us all the content that's up here in this library section. It's just kind of subdivided into a different folder structure. If you like looking at it in this like kind of multiple subfolder structure, you can knock yourself out and do that here. But all the core library content's going to be there. Everything else you see here are live packs that I've installed either from Ableton.com or from, third-party sound designers and things like that. But when you install live packs, they will show up here. If you scroll to the bottom of this list, if you have any available packs, let's say, for example, you own Ableton Live Suite and you have a bunch of packs that come with that, you can find them here and download and install them right from here. I have a bunch that I haven't installed yet just for space considerations on my hard drive. You'll also see, and it looks like I have a bunch of them, if you have certain packs that need to be updated, and you can run the update and reinstall them right from here, which is really convenient. Next we have, if you have an Ableton push, you'll see a little place here for push if you want to sync projects and things like that. If you're using the push standalone and you want to send projects back and forth, you can do that from here. User library, this by default is going to be a bunch of empty folders, But as you start to build your content library, as you start to maybe save presets for different instruments or audio effects or MIDI effects, or as you start to import samples, or as you start to create your own clips and save them, you can use the user library to fill that out, and you'll start to see the, I should say, you should start to see the user library fill out as you start creating your own content and saving it into these folders. Current projects is going to show us anything inside the current project. This is just a blank project I opened that I haven't saved yet, so it's telling me no content. But if I save this and I add some clips and things to it, or if I save different versions of it, or if I collect samples into it, I'll see all that stuff show up in my current project folder. And then everything below that, these are just customizable folders that you can add. So if you have sample packs and things that you want to have quick access to, you can add them from here. We can go to add folder. I'll just add one quickly here so you can see how that's done. Let's add one of the sample folders that I use a lot. So I'm going to go into my music folder, into my samples subfolder here, and let's go to the Jack and House Essentials. That sounds good. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit open. It's going to add it to my list here. It's going to analyze it, and it'll show me all the samples in that folder, and I can quickly access that from here. If you want to remove something from here, you can right click on it and just select remove from sidebar. It's not going to delete the folder from your hard drive, just removes it from view from the sidebar here. Lastly, we have this collections section on the top. This is great for just organizing content inside your browser. So you can see some of the ways that I've custom named these things. You'll have 7 different colored tags here. You can rename them by right-clicking and selecting rename, or pressing Command or Control R. But if you want to tag something into one of these collections, the collections, by the way, are just a way to quickly access stuff that can otherwise be accessed in the browser through multiple clicks. So for example, if I go to the synth favorite collection, let's say I want to add one of the synths from Ableton's library that I use all the time, which is Wavetable, one of my favorite synths that comes with the software. I can right click on this, and you can see here I can tag it to any one of those colored tags in my collections, or you can say I renamed all of them. So my synth favorites, which is tag number 1, or the red one, I can click here to tag it. Or let's take another one. Let's maybe take electric, which is a cool little electric piano plugin. I can also just tap the key here, key number 1, to tag that as well. So without even using my mouse, I'll use my mouse to click on it. I'll press 1, bam, it's going to tag that for me. I can press 1 again if I want to untag it, if I accidentally tag something. If I want to take this DS kick synth, hit 1, I'll tag it. So you can use those numbers to quickly tag stuff. So this is great, for example, if you're going through a sample library. You can say I have like melodic loops and hits, percussive loops and hits. If you're going through a sample library, you can actually use your arrow keys to move up and down through the browser. Left and right will go back and forth between different panels. If I'm in a folder, let's go down to one of my sample folders here. If I'm in a sample folder, like my samples small selection here, I can use the down arrow to open that folder up, and then I can go down through these different samples by using my up and down arrow keys. We got this preview on in the browser, so it's going to play what's in there. I can use the left arrow key to jump back to the top. Left arrow again will close the folder. If I want to turn the preview off, I can just click this little headphone button here. But that is going to do it for the browser and for just this overview. I apologize if this was a little bit long-winded, but we covered a lot of good information. And now as we move through and we start to build our track, you'll kind of know what's what as I'm clicking around and doing different things in the Ableton Live interface.